The second bill on the calendar for the day is House File 3614. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 3614, number 2 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to public safety, making policy and technical changes to certain provisions, the first engrossment.
I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Moller, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, before I go through the bill, I just wanted to give a minute to thank you to all of the committee members, especially Lead Novotny, our committee administrator, Ellen McDaniel, our CLA, Christian Lawrence, nonpartisan staff, Ben Johnson, John Walls, and our partisan researchers, Zach Meinertz and John Holtquist. And we also had 2 externs, Madeline Pung and Miriam Latsabidze, who were helpful to me this year. This bill has multiple provisions that are beneficial to victim survivors and provisions that make the criminal justice system more just. It continues the work that we did last year to modernize our statutes. This bill includes a number of provisions from members of our committee and also includes the governor's policy provisions. And for those of you who aren't on public safety, we have a lot of different agencies. We've got the Department of Public Safety, Department of Corrections, the Corrections Ombudsperson, the Peace Officers Standard and Training Board, and the Minnesota Sentencing Guidelines Commission. So we have a lot of different agencies within our jurisdiction. It also contains several GOP-led proposals. And I'll say that while the topic of public safety can be controversial, overall, our committee hearings were very respectful and very productive. And so again, I want to thank all the committee members for that work. I just want to go through a few highlights of this bill. If you look first at Article 1, we have a provision there that enhances protections for confidentiality of victims of domestic violence, the communications that they have with their advocates. A number of other confidential communications are protected in statute, including those with sexual assault survivors and their advocates, the attorney-client privilege, everybody's familiar with that, the protections that you have when you have communications with your doctor and mental health providers. And we believe that domestic violence survivors deserve the same kinds of protections as those other ones already in statute. We have a representative tab key bill that provides for victim input in the end of confinement review committee process, and that's when someone's leaving incarceration, they get assigned a level. Right now, there's no requirement that victims have any input in that, and they will get notified now when a hearing is scheduled and have an opportunity to provide input. We have a provision in this bill from Representative Erdahl, and it has to do with notifying custodians when there is an order for protection or changes to orders for protection, especially custodians of children who would be impacted by these changes. I know that he has a situation that, a tragic situation that happened in his district, and I believe he'll speak to that on third reading, but this is a really important protection especially for the children in those circumstances. This bill also has order for protection and restraining order service requirements. This is a Representative Pinto bill, and it allows for these orders to be served electronically. In other words, making sure that the people, when these orders are issued, are actually served with these orders and that they go into effect to protect victim survivors. Article 2 has a provision from Representative Fisher related to the collection of DNA. Our bill aligns with a case from several years ago now that said it's unconstitutional to take DNA from someone before they've been convicted. And also we make sure that for juveniles, it's with consent or via court order. We have a Representative Aiken bill that amends our overdose Good Samaritan law. And Good Samaritan laws are those that protect the people who intervene in certain situations from civil or criminal liabilities that might otherwise result. And this provision expands the protections to not only the person who makes an emergency call if somebody is experiencing an overdose, but also to anyone else acting in concert with them to care for the person experiencing that overdose. And with us today, we have Colleen Ronnie, who's been a real champion on this issue and works with a lot of young people and was noticing that the law, the way it's currently written, was a barrier for people calling and getting emergency help when when somebody was experiencing an overdose. So thank you, Colleen, for your advocacy on this. We have another bill by Representative Pinto related to sexual assaults when there is somebody who is perhaps given an intoxicating substance, like a date rape drug, and then know they're assaulted, and then they wake up somewhere, and there is a barrier to being able to prosecute those cases because the victim doesn't know where that happened at, and so this will allow that prosecution to happen in any county, either where the assault happened, if they know that, or where the victim kind of wakes up in that situation. We have a provision in here related to post-conviction relief based on newly discovered evidence, and this allows, when there's newly discovered evidence, a chance to come back in to the court and make a case. It is very narrowly tailored, but the way the law was written currently was just excluding cases that should have gotten that look when there is important newly discovered evidence. Article 3 of the bill has a Representative Becker-Finn provision related to prohibiting commercial sale of human bones. I guess it's okay to sell skulls in Minnesota. And so this is going to make sure that we are no longer able to see that happening in our state. We have a provision from Representative Jess Hansen related to banning training on excited delirium. Excited delirium is not a thing. It's been disavowed by the American Medical Association, the Psychiatric Association, the College of Emergency Physicians, and we want to make sure that our law enforcement aren't getting trained on something that just simply is not a thing. We have a Representative Hewitt bill commissioning railroad police officers. This bill has been in the works for a number of years, and it makes sure that those who are commissioned have to follow the post-board standards. And then Representative Tabke had a bill that we saw an investigation that CARE 11 did regarding sexual assault by private contractors who are transporting inmates and pretrial detainees. And the investigation exposed that this was happening with a lot of these, or when it was happening, it was with these private companies. And so our bill makes it clear that these private transport companies do in fact have to be licensed in order to prevent this kind of practice from happening. Article 4 relates to really a modernization of our predatory offender statutes, and Representative Rarick and I have been working on this issue in tandem with all of the sexual assault issues that we've been working on over the years. And this was sort of one piece of that bigger package that we really needed to work on and make sure that the people for whom the registry was set up and designed for are on the registry, and then the people who shouldn't be on the registry for other crimes that are unrelated really shouldn't be. And we have worked, again, really carefully in that, so I want to thank you, Representative Rarick, for all of your work on that. We also have a Representative O'Driscoll provision in this bill that makes sure that when people are public workers like property assessors and inspectors, if they're going into the home of a level 2 sex offender, there may be situations where they should be notified of that. And then we have a Representative Nash bill that, again, we've been talking about for a couple of years, and this relates to level 3 offenders and really makes our law better in that if children are a risk factor, right now the current statute just says when they're considering placement, they should consider schools. Well, we know there might be a lot of other places where children congregate, so they should consider those other places as well. But if it's a risk factor, if it's not a risk factor for that person, that may not be a consideration in that case. But if it is a risk factor, then we should consider that. And then finally, Article 5 has corrections policy bills in it from both Representative Curran and Representative Tabke. Thank you.
There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Nash moves to amend House Bill number 3614, the first engrossment. The amendment is coded A11.
The member from Carver, Representative Nash, to your amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members. Thank you, Chair Moller. The A11 is effectively the language from House File 4793 that in working with Chair Pinto, Chair Moller, we were able to get through 2 committee stops. And for those of you that remembered my floor speech a number of months or weeks ago, you remember the story that I shared as, from my childhood. I grew up as an abused kid. And this amendment, the bill, will make it so that for those that might choose to take a mandatory reporter's report and try to deflect it into not becoming something that you would act on, that it is now a misdemeanor crime. And the years of growing up as an abused kid create a lot of confusion. There's a lot of pain that I deal with. I have tried to work through that for a lot of years. And the thing that I have taken away from this is that while the physical wounds may go away, they heal, cuts heal, bones mend back together, the mental torture and anguish doesn't go away. And it has been very hard for me to talk about this. You may remember I said this is the least Jim Nash floor speech you'll ever hear, because I want to appeal to you to recognize that we have an obligation, both statutory and moral obligation, to do right by the kids here in the state of Minnesota. So in adopting this amendment, what we're saying is that if you are in a position of power as a mandatory reporter or the manager of a mandatory reporter, you may not deflect that report away. You may remember that I shared that probably the most important mandatory reporter in my life failed me miserably, and that was my mom. My mom was in charge of a lot of nurses at the hospital that she worked at, and she made the abuse just disappear. That after years of being beaten with a baseball bat or broom handles or fists or axe handles, that she covered it up and said, well, Jim fell. And somebody asked me afterwards, well, do you think your mom should have been punished criminally? And I actually said, yeah, I do. That's a big thing to say. And that's hard to say. But it is the right thing to make sure that we try to close our statutes so that they don't have a choice, that they recognize that in their position of authority, they have to do this. So what I've learned since I last addressed you and since I talked in committee is I have two biological sisters, Karen and Jennifer. I have two stepsisters, Summer and Valerie. All of us were beaten. All of us were beaten badly. I took the worst, I think, because my dad just figured his son could take the abuse better than the daughters. All of us had somebody who made a report, and all of those people made it go away. And that is absolutely reprehensible, and we're dealing with it. Until a couple of months ago, I didn't really have much of a relationship with my stepsisters, but I've spoken on the phone with them both. They've both recounted the abuse that my dad laid on them. Members, this is an opportunity for us to do something that will live beyond our time here at the Capitol. And we do a lot of bills, and we feel passionately about them. We do things that we think, oh, that'll help our state. And they're good, and I've done them. We've all done them. But this has the ability to live past our time here at the Capitol, because no kid should ever wind up as a 55-year-old guy who doesn't sleep much, who is confused about his childhood, is confused when his mom told him that she knew about the mandatory or the abuse and just figured that he could take it. If you remember, I told you that my mom shared that with me when we were in a car a couple of years ago. I asked her about all her work as a mandatory reporter. She says, yes, Jimmy, I was so proud. I saved so many women and so many children. I'm so proud of that. And I asked her, I said, well, Mom, why didn't you save me? And that's when she told me she figured I could just take it. And that's about the worst answer that a parent could give their child. And it's a lot to process. But if we could take this amendment, and I know that we're going to deal with this as a friendly amendment, folks, this makes it so that the Jims and the Karens and the Jennifers and the Summers and the Valeries have a little hope, and that somebody who knows better will be held accountable for not. In the gallery today, I'll pull this together. In the gallery today, we're joined by people from Safe Passage, Minnesota. I had the opportunity to speak to them today. They are side by side with us, working to save some kids. So I'll stop blubbering, Madam Speaker. But we have a chance to do something really good. And I would be remiss if I didn't say, please lobby your senators, because they are a little slower. And that's one of the reasons that Chair Moller has agreed to put this into the bill, because the Senate has not acted on this yet. And remember, when you speak to senators, slowly and with flashcards. But Chair Moller, Madam Speaker, thank you. I know that if I did roll call this, and I'm not, that it would be a straight green board, because this is important enough that we step up to the plate for people who are literally defenseless against a person like my dad. Thank you.
Discussion to the amendment. Representative Moller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Nash, for sharing your story with us. And no child, you didn't deserve that, and your siblings didn't deserve that. And we just appreciate that you are working to protect other children from experiencing the same thing. I have to tell you that just today I finished listening to a podcast about Larry Nassar, because in my free time I listen to public safety true crime podcasts. But I have to tell you, I listened to that podcast too, and if there was ever any doubt that we needed something like this, that is another example of why we need this bill and this amendment in our public safety package. And for all of those reasons, I'm going to recommend that members vote yes on the amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Nash, thank you for really bearing your soul on this. It's never an easy thing to do, to rehash really painful things, whether it's our childhood or anything, but especially when it's your childhood, because you try to work through those things as an adult, but they can still be very raw. So thank you for that. And thank you, Representative Moller, for taking this piece of legislation. It's super important. And I'm glad to see in the work that we do down here, as much as we argue and whatever, you know, whether it's Representative Pinto's bill tomorrow to try to get to these kids that have been abused, and where are they falling through the cracks? And this is one way this is one place that we can close that opportunity for kids to fall through the cracks. So I'm super grateful, Representative Nash, for you bringing this. And members, let's light up the board green on this. It may be somebody that you know that you're protecting by voting for this bill. Please vote green. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
New Brindley moves to amend House Bill number 3614, the first and gross one as amended. The amendment is coded A10.
The member from Chisago, Representative New Brindley, to your amendment.
Thank you, Matt. Perhaps you'd like me to keep the tuned down microphone, but I'm going to switch it up anyway. Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. My amendment is actually quite simple. There is language in the underlying bill to prevent the sale of calcified body parts. My amendment simply makes it apply to any body part. We shouldn't be in the business of profiting from the sale of human remains at all, not just the calcified remains. And I want to thank Representative Becker-Finn for working with me earlier on this and for already including some language to protect legitimate medical interests in the state. That is one thing that we changed to make sure. Clearly, Minnesota is a state that prides itself in our healthcare innovation, our healthcare companies, and we have a robust medical device industry here in Minnesota that did need to be protected. So thank you for that. It also includes language to ensure that that reasonable costs related to human remains, that it's okay to receive, not compensation, but to be able to recoup those reasonable costs. And in that, we also added, this is language directly from the organ donation statute, with the addition of the final disposition of human remains, because frankly, in the organ donation statute, final disposition is organ donation. It's going into somebody else's body, and that's not the case here. So it allows folks to recoup costs for final disposition of remains as well. I've worked very closely with folks at the University of Minnesota to make sure that this protects organ donation, that it protects vital interests, medical interests in the state of Minnesota. We've done a pretty thorough job of making sure that this is complete, and so I would ask for a yes vote on the amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Discussion. The member from Ramsey, Representative Becker-Finn.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and yes, the underlying language is my bill. The reason I brought this forward is because, as mentioned by Chair Moller, we do know that there is the practice in oddities shops that there are people who sell human bones for whatever reason. It's not something I understand, but I think we can all agree that that's not a practice that we should be supporting. On the whole, I agree with Representative New Brindley, but this language that's in the amendment isn't quite there yet. We have heard from organ donation services organizations who are concerned. They just want to make sure that we get this right. So I have committed to Representative New Brindley that in conference we will continue to work on this to try to get it right, to expand it to all human body parts. But right now I'm asking for a no vote on this amendment so that we don't have any unintended consequences that haven't been worked out yet. Thank you.
Discussion. Further discussion to the amendment. The member from Anoka, Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative New Brindley, for bringing this amendment. And thank you, Representative Becker-Finn, for the start on this. I think it's a good start. I think we all agree. Certainly, hearing the story about the skulls being sold in oddity shops, that's wrong. I hope we can all agree that that's wrong. Human bodies aren't for sale, and they shouldn't be for sale. And we know that's a problem, but we know more than that is already a problem. And we know that from, for example, a Reuters report from 2017. You can find this pretty easily if you start searching about human tissue sales. But in 2017, Reuters did an investigative series on body brokers. And there's the part one of their series is headlined, "In the U.S. market for human bodies, almost anyone can dissect and sell the dead. When Americans leave their bodies to science, they are also donated to commerce. Cadavers and body parts, especially those of the poor, are sold in a thriving and largely unregulated market. Grisly abuses abound." And there's a quote in that piece from someone at the University of Minnesota talking about the concerns about it. Angela MacArthur, who directs the body donation program at the University of Minnesota Medical School, describes the, quote, "The current state of affairs is a free-for-all. We are seeing similar problems to what we saw with grave robbers centuries ago. I don't know if I can state this strongly enough. What they are doing is profiting from the sale of humans." So I appreciate that what we are passing today may be good enough. I don't know what the concerns are from the organ donation folks. They certainly, the advocates for having a broader definition, haven't heard from them. I haven't heard from them. Representative New Brindley, who raised this before, hasn't heard from them. Maybe there is an issue that can be worked out in conference committee, but we, as the House, going into that conference committee process, should state unequivocally, human beings, human body parts, human tissues, living or dead, are not for sale. Human body parts are not a commodity to be bought and sold. Donation, that's a different issue. But human body parts are not for sale. Please vote yes.
Further discussion to the amendment. The member from Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative New Brindley, for bringing forward this amendment. I think it's the debate is certainly worth having, and we certainly do want to ensure that that we aren't using this instance to allow for these human remains to be sold. And so I wanted to follow up with Representative Becker-Finn and just find out in Representative New Brindley's amendment which sections of this amendment are objectionable. If she would yield to that question.
Representative Becker-Finn.
I was waiting to see if he was going to ask me to yield. Thank you, Madam Speaker. So this amendment, I tried to reach Representative New Brindley on Friday so we could figure this out, but I was not able to reach her on Friday before deadline. I met with someone from Life Source today, which is a organ donation organization, and they just want to make sure that this isn't going to have any unintended consequences. Again, I'm not saying I specifically necessarily have problems with the overall goal of what we're trying to do. I will also remind everybody that nobody even knew about this issue until I brought this bill forward. So it's interesting that I'm glad we're all supportive of it. We should be. I just want to get this right, and I don't want to cause any problems for folks who need organ donation in order to continue to live. So I have, as I've said, I'm committed to continue working with Representative New Brindley and others to make it more expansive if that's what we need to do. But I don't want to make things harder for people seeking organ donation, and that's why I'm requesting a no vote on the amendment.
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'm really glad to hear of the premise and the understanding that appears to be very globally supported here in this body, that we really don't want any human remains going and being sold and for people profiting potentially off of human remains. And so that's why I think it's incredibly important for us to establish a really strong House position in this to ensure that this is a part of the conversation as we move forward from this body, which is exactly why I'm asking for support of this amendment, because this additional language, this protects all human remains. And we should all be concerned about that. It sounds like we all do. So now let's allow the language that we put forward into conference committee. Let's allow that to be exactly the position of the House of Representatives. And I really appreciate the work of Representative New Brindley doing the good, detailed work to ensure that this is that we're taking this position here in the House. And I'll just say, the members who have spoken so far, we heard this bill in committee. We heard the testimony given, and I appreciate Representative Becker-Finn that you brought forward this language, and I look forward to getting this right. But that starts, members, by ensuring that we take a strong House position on this particular language. Thank you.
The member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Can't we stand for a core principle? If there's a detail that can be addressed, as mentioned in the conference committee. But frankly, first and foremost, we need to vote for core principles. And I think this is one. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Further discussion to the amendment. Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. So I'm a little frustrated because I've been working on this for a long time, and I did do my homework. I did do my homework, and actually, I saw the Reuters article, and I was intrigued that someone from our very own University of Minnesota was quoted in that article, and so I reached out to her. And I had a lengthy conversation with her, and in fact, she works on these issues very specifically at the University of Minnesota, procurement of human remains. And so she is our expert on this issue. And in fact, she is the one who pointed out to me that we needed to make sure that folks could recoup the cost for final disposition of human remains, because that's not part of the organ donation statute. She is also the one who pointed out to me that, hey, there are legitimate medical uses that we want to protect. So for example, Medtronic has a process, they will purchase calcified remains, frankly, bones. And they will purchase bone. They will, listen, I don't know what they do to it, right? But they modify that bone. It undergoes processes, and then that is then sold as sort of a medical product. So we wanted to make sure that we protected those kinds of things. However, at this point, not including all remains is a red herring, and it's silly. It does not make sense. The reality is, if folks want to talk about organ donation, or if folks are concerned about organ donation, guess what? We are not touching the organ donation statute. This underlying language in the bill, and of course my amendment, is in regards to statute 609.84. The organ donation statute is 525A. We are making 0 changes to organ donation, and I want to be very, very clear about that. Because if the excuse we are using to not protect the dignity of all human remains is that somehow this affects organ donation, I am telling you right now, you can look it up. It's 525A. You are welcome to look that up just so you have your own assurances. The statute we are changing here is 609.84, completely different sections of statute. We are not touching organ donation. In fact, the only way these two statutes are even related with this underlying language is that we are requiring the same protection to recuperate some costs. That's it. That is the only way in which these are even similar. That's it. So if our concern here today is organ donation, I am telling you right now, and I would encourage you, if you are even considering voting no on this amendment, please look it up. I know everybody's got their laptops and iPads. Please look it up. The organ donation statute is 525A. The statute that we are changing is 609.84. They are completely unrelated. Now, interestingly, one thing that I learned through this process, and particularly by speaking to Ms. McCarthy at the University of Minnesota, in Minnesota, we actually have already protections in place that most states don't. We have already decided in the state of Minnesota that it is illegal to sell a whole body. That's actually free game in 48 other states. The buying and selling of whole bodies is free game in 48 other states. But in the state of Minnesota, we have already chosen to protect that and to say there is dignity that should be afforded to a human body, to human remains. However, we don't have anything in statute to protect human remains, the dignity of human remains, that might be coming back into our state. And that's where we come up with this problem of finding things in curiosity shops or other places. So while as Minnesotans, we've already acknowledged and recognized that we should not be in the business of profiting off the sale of whole bodies, If you say no on this amendment today, we're saying, yeah, but if we chop that up and just do a little here and a little there, that's okay. We're going to allow for that. Now, I voted no on this underlying bill language in committee, and the reason for that is that I don't think we should be okay with doing things like this halfway. Because frankly, I get it. I am happy that we're at least choosing to give some dignity to bones and teeth. That's a good, positive move forward. However, as we all know, anyone who's been around this chamber for a while, it sometimes becomes very difficult to get a second bite at the apple, right? You get something done and you say, well, that's good enough. This is not good enough. This underlying language is not good enough. And while there are organizations or folks who want to say, well, we just don't know yet, I don't know. I've done the homework. I do know. I did choose to reach out to the people who would be affected by this. I did choose to reach out to our local expert in the state of Minnesota and have a lengthy conversation with her about this and what needed to happen. I did choose to reach out to our medical device industry here in Minnesota to say, how do we make this right for you guys? How do we make sure this is done correctly and we protect really important medical innovation that's happening in the state of Minnesota? I did do my homework. I did do my homework, which is why I can tell you with a surety that this amendment does not touch organ donation. It doesn't. And so, let's be very clear about what a vote on this bill means today. First of all, Madam Speaker, I'd like to request a roll call on this.
Representative New Brindley requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm going to be very clear about what this means, your vote on this amendment. If you vote yes on this amendment today, you are doing so with the understanding that we have thoroughly protected organ donation. If you vote yes on this amendment, you do so with the understanding that we have thoroughly protected our medical innovation in the state of Minnesota. If you vote yes on this amendment today, you are doing so with the understanding that we should protect the dignity of human remains, full stop. There should be no exceptions to that. If you vote no on this amendment today, you are saying that you don't believe it is important to protect the dignity of all human remains. You are doing so willfully. You've had plenty of opportunity now to look up these statutes and to see for yourself how unrelated they are. I've been very clear about what those, I'll give them to you one more time. 525A is the organ donation statute. The bill language applies to 609.84. You've had plenty of time to see that these are completely unrelated. So if you choose to vote no on this amendment, you are choosing to say that we do not care about the dignity of all human remains, which is patently absurd. I hope that you've all taken the time, didn't take long, to look up these statutes so you can make an informed decision here. Because you've had a chance to make an informed decision. So there's no excuse. There's no excuse for voting no on this amendment. And members, I would request a yes vote on this.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. Will the clerk please call the name of the member who's voting remotely?
Engen.
No.
Engen.
Engen votes aye.
Engen votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 63 ayes and 68 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 3614, as amended.
Third reading as amended. Discussion to the bill. The member from Wright, Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, members. Thank you, Chair Moller, Vice Chair Feist, all the members on the Public Safety Committee, and of course our staff has done a great job of supporting us. Chair Moller, you've already spoken quite well and thoroughly to the content of the bill, so I won't expound upon that. I just wanted to rise to make a comment about our process that we utilize in this body and how I'm pleasantly inspired by how that process has worked with this omnibus. I plan on voting yes on this omnibus bill. I think this omnibus bill is a good example of putting together a package of legislation that has broad support. While I certainly note that we have 5 members in the minority who've authored bills that are included in this omnibus, I don't think that that's necessarily a chief component in considering an omnibus worthy of bringing to the floor. Just the fact that we're dealing with issues and moving legislation that has broad support, that is overall, despite amendment conversations that we've had, non-controversial and advancing the public good is something that should be the goal of all of our omnibus work. And as somebody who's been observing the legislative process for long before I became a member myself, and has been involved at the grassroots level with activists and been privy to activist conversations on the other side of the aisle, I think one of the things that are pretty consistently complained about is kind of the omnibus politics that gets played sometimes, where there are really heavily controversial bills that get wrapped into a sausage containing a lot of stuff that we broadly agree on and that we hear in committee and that we pass out unanimously. And so it's good to see that that's not the case here. And I would just suggest that as we move forward, we see more of that. Because, you know, we both sides caucus, we go through these amendment tables, we end up having the conversation anyway, right? Like we go through on the things that we disagree, and we end up having the debate on each of the individual items. We just had a prolonged debate regarding the way we handle human remains. We're not circumventing the debate by doing it in a way that wraps up everything into one large package. So why not go bill by bill and actually just hear them on the merits and debate them on the merits? So I'm glad that that happened in this case. I very much appreciate it. I look forward to voting yes. And thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Meeker, Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I thank Representative Moller, Chair Moller, for including this provision in her bill. I had a bill included in this that deals with custodians, guardians, and those under their care. This provision creates a definition of custodian that covers any of a petitioner's minor children as long as petitioner's parental rights have not been terminated. There was a concern maybe that abusers could be opted out of this somehow and claim that an OFP was somehow ineffective because a custodian was not notified. We have made changes to make sure that they are. When a custodian exists, that person or those people, if there are more than one, must receive notice of any order for protection hearing, other order, change to an OFP, or cancellation of the OFP. That's what this provision is about. And you might ask, why is this necessary? I'm going to relay to you now a story about an episode, a tragic episode, that happened in my district, in the town of Olivia. On March 24th, 2022, 13-year-old Isaac Hoff was stabbed to death while visiting his mother's Rihanna Heck's residence. His grandmother, Sandy Hoff, had full legal custody of Isaac. Rihanna had had an order for protection placed upon her boyfriend, Houston Morris, at the beginning of March. Within 2 weeks, she had the order removed. Isaac's grandmother was unaware that the order for protection had been removed when Isaac asked if he could go visit his mother. At her home, a violent incident broke out. Morris attacked Rihanna, who produced a knife to protect herself. Morris took the knife away and slashed at Rihanna. Isaac sprang to his mother's aid. Morris attempted to stab Rihanna, but Isaac intervened and was stabbed in the chest. Isaac called 911, pleading for help for himself and his mother. With his dying words, he named Houston Morris as his assailant. Had his grandmother known about the removal of the restraining order, of the order for protection, she would have told Isaac to stay home that night. The gist of this provision in this bill is to ensure that legal guardians providing care and support for minors are included in any updates to orders for protection. In his last words, Isaac Hoff cried out for justice. Let Isaac's voice be heard in this legislation. I would like to recognize Isaac's family that are up here in the balcony. Thank you.
The member from Stearns, Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Chair Moller, thank you. I've been working for 4 years to get this provision in the public safety bill. And please indulge me as I give you some background on this. The provision that is in the bill deals with level 2 sex offenders. And I'm going to give you a kind of a gruesome story today and teach you how sex offenders operate and what our laws are here in the state of Minnesota. There are 3 classifications. The first classification, level 1, these are individuals that have been involved in some type of sexual crime, most likely not to reoffend, and quite honestly, we don't keep very close track of them here in the state of Minnesota. The other group that's on the other end is level 3. And that's probably the group that you are most familiar with by paying attention to the media. And maybe it's happened in your community. This is where there's a media blast, there is neighborhood meetings, there is public information, law enforcement meets with folks and meets with individuals. It's level 3. In the area that I practice in and have practiced in real estate, we call this Megan's Law. And you never want to have a law named after you because it means it starts out once upon a time and it does not end happily ever after. Megan, though not a resident of the state of Minnesota, her parents were looking to purchase a home. And in the real estate profession, what happens is you are required to disclose what are known as material facts. And material facts are those things that could influence the buying decision. And what Megan's parents didn't know is the home that they were looking to purchase in the neighborhood, make an offer on to be their new family home, there was a sexual offender and predator that was living in the neighborhood. because there were no laws that required disclosure on this information. Well, you could probably fill in the rest of the blanks in this story about why it's called Megan's Law. And so a national campaign and a national crusade got underway to make sure that level 3 sex offenders are disclosed and are tracked, because this is the group that is highly likely to offend if they are released from incarceration and from treatment. The other thing that I think about with the level 3 and with this issue is the fact that we as a profession in real estate have taken this so seriously. And the legislature said that we have to disclose this information in a written form. That's what I say in class to kind of help emphasize when something's important to students, that this is disclosed. It's not only disclosed one time, it's disclosed 4 or 5 different times in a real estate transaction. The first time that you agree that you want to be represented by an agent in what is called the Agency Relationships and Real Estate Transactions Disclosure. It says if you have concerns about registered predators or sex offenders as it relates to your purchase, contact, and it has local law enforcement, has the website of the Department of Corrections, and has the telephone number. If you sign a buyer representation contract to be represented by an agent in the state of Minnesota, it is in that contract as well. The third time that it appears will be in the seller's disclosure as a pre-printed item, and the fourth will be in the purchase agreement to purchase real estate. So you may be saying, why are you giving us this background in this? Because the gap has been with level 2 sex offenders. This is the group that are out in the community but do not have to register as sex offenders. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I was approached by the Stearns County assessor on a meeting that I was having with their office, and they said, we feel there's a gap in state law. There's these registered 2 folks that are out there. And they had a young assessor who was going to be going out to a home doing a routine review of property. And that individual had come across some information that there may be a level 2 sex offender that was residing at that residence. And again, I don't know if you know how assessing law works in the state of Minnesota, but the county assessors are to make multiple attempts every 5 years to view property inside and outside. Can you imagine if you are a young, new, excited deputy assessor or assistant assessor, and you go up and you ring that doorbell and you are invited into the home by the occupant of that property. And unbeknownst to you, that is a level 2 individual. And you are walking through that home with that individual. And you get into the lower level of that home with that individual. And that individual feels or desires to commit a crime again. Unbeknownst to this individual who in good faith, while executing their duties, came forward to do their job but didn't know what was on the other side of the door. This not only protects assessors, but if you are a person who does home inspection, or permit enforcement, so if you are a building official, same thing. It also extends to the fact that if you are someone who is going to be required to do inspections, we've had a lot of discussion on this floor over the years about the importance of rental property and having habitable rental property. What about an inspector who goes into that situation? Again, Chair Moller, thank you for thinking of people that have been in the breach or in the gap on this. It's very refreshing to see this type of language in a bipartisan way being brought forward to protect people. And I just shudder to think that if we didn't have this type of law, that what would happen on the 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and 10 o'clock news is this type of crime, if it were to be committed, would lead the news, and here's the tagline that I think would be most embarrassing for this legislature. There is no state law to protect these people, to give them information, to let them know so that they can partner up when they go. They can bring someone else along. They can assign another a person to do that job. They can look out for the personal safety of people who are doing their jobs on behalf of all of us in the community. So again, Chair Moller, thank you for helping me see the work of 4 years on this. And I just hope that as we did with the veterans de-escalation stuff, when we say, well, Representative O'Driscoll, what's the matrix about how we know if this is good legislation or not? Because we don't turn on the news and it leads with a story and there's no state law to protect these people. We have the ability today in this bill to protect those individuals. Madam Speaker and members, thank you.
The member from Carver, Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Chair Moller, thank you, not just for taking the A11, but for the other provision that you put into the bill as well. And for those watching at home, I brought an amendment 2 years ago, and it's been something that we've had to work on for quite some time. And I just wanted to make sure that folks watching at home, who oftentimes think, well, all they ever do down there is partisan stuff, here's a very concrete example of being very bipartisan. And I wanted to thank the chair for working with me and my community, because if you remember, a couple of years ago, there was a level 3 sex offender that was placed in the city of Victoria in a neighborhood, and their level 3 sex offense was around children, and that level 3 sex offender was placed in a neighborhood of 728. And we didn't really have much to use to sort of filter that person out. And I put together an amendment, and the chair offline said we should work on this. And I just wanted to say thanks for working on this. And it took a while, and sometimes the good things do take a while, and we have to let some work go by. But if you've never had a level 3 sex offender placed in your district, I pray that you don't, but once you do, the phone is going to ring a lot. And I think that this work together, Madam Chair, is going to make it so that neighbors, parents, and children don't have to live in fear about what could possibly happen, because we've tightened this up a little bit more by putting the criterion into the bill. So once again, thanks for working on this in a bipartisan manner, making sure that we're once again doing things that are good and right for Minnesota children. And again, thank you for taking the A11. I am very, very grateful. Thank you.
The member from Wright, Representative Rarick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, I also want to thank Chair Moller. Of all the people in this body, I think that Chair Moller is one of the hardest working and most knowledgeable in her issue area. And it's such a joy to work with you. And I mean that sincerely from the depths of my heart. You've done some really hard things. You're always coming up with a new court case and all kinds of things that we're working on. But in this particular case today, I want to thank you also for including me in the Predatory Offender Reform Working Group findings that we put in here. And I know we couldn't do all of it. We didn't have enough money, but we'll return to that. So those that are listening in the public wondering, well, what happened to the data components? We needed data because every time we asked a question for on the Predatory Offender Reform Working Group, the answer was, well, we don't really know because the Predatory Offender Registry wasn't really built for our questions. And boy, do we ask a lot of questions, legislators. We do, and I probably ask more than most. But I know I do. My colleagues are saying, yes, you do. But we ask so many questions, and the only way to get answers is actually do the data component. So I know we made that commitment. When we have a budget year again, we will be working and doing that part of it too. But what is in the bill is some of the findings from the Predatory Offender Working Group, which actually only worked for about 3.5 months. They did a tremendous amount of work and look at the Predatory Offender Registry in a very short amount of time. There were 25 members. They were outstanding. They were very engaged. Our 3 co-chairs were just absolutely outstanding and from very different parts of life. Let's just say one was a public defender, we had a sheriff, and then we had someone from the AG's office. So a whole spectrum of people were on this Predatory Offender Working Group. And some of the things that did remain in this bill is that we removed false imprisonment from which you could have to register. And why is that important? We had kind of that conversation in the Public Safety Committee But false imprisonment could be as simple as you detaining somebody for a matter of seconds, just very mere moments. That is false imprisonment. If you're holding somebody or stopping them from leaving, that is false imprisonment. That is not what the Predatory Offender Registry was meant for. The Predatory Offender Registry, of course, was developed by us, the legislature, in 1991. And it was because of what happened with Jacob Wetterling. Now, there are some people that probably weren't even born at that point, but Jacob Wetterling was abducted. I believe he was 13 years old in 1998. Oh, he was 11. Oh, thank you. And our lead, Damath, Minority Leader Damath, is in her district. So he was 11. Thank you. So Jacob Wetterling was 11 when he was abducted. And law enforcement had absolutely no way to look for suspects because we didn't have any registry. We had nothing. And so it was created and birthed out of the Jacob Wetterling incident. And Patty Wetterling actually was a part of the working group still. So all of these years later, Patty Wetterling is still fighting for justice for victims, and she was engaged and she was really a part of this working group. So, in fact, one of the things that she kind of left us with is right now there are children on the Predatory Offender Registry, and she would like to see them not on there. But that's a huge thing because there's all kinds of reasons why teenagers are on it, and so we did look at that and we did have that conversation. But again, what we're doing in this bill, I should say, is removing false imprisonment because it really doesn't have anything to do with predatory behavior. Is it bad? Yes, but we do have kidnapping. So kidnapping is completely different than false imprisonment. So we're removing false imprisonment for a crime that you would have to register for. The other thing that I thought was really important is to extend the time that juveniles can go through sex offender treatment up to 24 months because it takes them at least 12 months to get through sex offender treatment, and then the judge can decide whether or not that they should move in a different direction. So they could either sentence them or stay the sentence. They could do either, but they need enough time to figure out, is this person still a danger? And that's the most important thing. The only reforms that we did were reforms that made this Predatory Offender Registry stronger and better for law enforcement to use as a tool because we want law enforcement to have the best tool possible. There are 18,700 offenders on the registry today. And so that's a lot of people to look through. And we want to make sure that people that are on the registry are actually predators and not, yes, there are some, they've done bad things potentially, but we're looking for people that have the propensity to actually sexually abuse, rape, or kidnap a child. That's where it was created for. And now it's expanded beyond that, also for adults too. But there's a lot of work yet to be done, and I know we talked about off-ramps, which means if you're on it, how do you get off of it if you have reformed yourself and things like that. That's not in this bill. Those are conversations that we had in the working group. That is not in this bill. The other thing I would say is there's still, there's a small loophole that, again, Chair Moller found that we closed, and it had to do with a court case. But this is just what an eagle eye she is. She is just this incredible eagle eye, and she's reading through court cases, and we had 2 conflicting court cases, and they were non-precedential. But you know what? She cares so much about what's in the law and what's not in the law that shouldn't be in the law, that's what's in here. So we did close a small loophole. So members, I'm going to support this bill, and I would say again that if there's any example of how to work bipartisanly, work across the aisle, and even bicamerally, because I know she does that too, and that is very difficult to do, as we have found. She is the example. So today, I know you're getting a lot of bipartisan love, Chair Moller, and it's well-deserved because you really go far beyond, and you are so versed in your issue area, and we are incredibly grateful, and I miss being in your committee. Thank you, Madam Chair. Speaker.
The member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Chair Moller, for a decent bill and for some of those really good provisions in there, as Representative Varick just articulated and Representative Nash's piece. I do wish you would have taken the amendment on the body parts. There are many cultures where the human body, they don't even want autopsies done on a deceased human body because they see it as dishonoring. And so I just think it's really important that we do adopt that language eventually. And I don't know why we couldn't have adopted it now, and then if it wasn't worked out later, make those changes in conference committee that way. But it seems like a no-brainer, and I just feel like that was something that was a missed opportunity when it comes to this bill. So members, thank you for your time, and I hope that when this goes to conference that you will consider adding the new Brindley language. Thank you.
The member from Sherburne, Representative Novotny.
Madam Speaker, long before I came into the House here, this is how I envisioned public safety bills would go. We'd have discussions, we'd have some arguments, we'd have some disagreements, and we'd make bills better. And for the most part, I can say that the bills included in this omnibus bill are that. Going forward, I hope we have the same spirit of cooperation and unified work in the next bill. We've got some things I believe that if we are all here in the next session that myself and Representative Pinto can work on with the HRO language so we can make that better. Overall, this bill makes Minnesota better, and it makes the public actually safer. And for that reason, I encourage my members to vote green.
The member from Stearns, Leader Damath.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I too want to thank Chair Moller for your bipartisan work. This, I would fully agree, this is the way that we should be legislating. Maybe it isn't perfect, not all of the amendments were on there, but there was great work that was done. And this is when we have the opportunity to show Minnesota how we can actually lead in this state and do good things for the state of Minnesota. I also was pleased to see that there wasn't any additional irresponsible spending in this bill, that it was truly policy, that we could get behind it and support it. Thank you, Chair Moller. Thank you, Chair Lead Novotny, for your work, for the amendment authors, and I would encourage members to vote green on this bill.
To the author of the bill, the member from Ramsey, Representative Moller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And wow, thank you so much to the comments on this bill, and really excited to learn that you're going to be supporting it. It really is a good bill. I don't know, I feel like almost like it's, you know, it's Twilight Zone eclipse day or something. I'm not sure. But really, really do appreciate the bipartisan work that we did in committee. And I really do hope that we can continue that, and very much enjoy being chair of the Public Safety Committee and working with everybody on our team. We have a great team. We have a great staff. And I'm really excited to see that board light up green. So vote yes, members. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. Will the clerk call the names of the members voting remotely?
Engen.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 130 yeas and 0 nays, the bill is passed as amended and it's titled agreed to.